My name is Naomi, and I'm 32 years old. 4 years, I poured my heart and soul into Sterling Manufacturing, a company that was once the pride of our Midwest city. I started as a junior engineer, fresh out of college, brimming with ideas and a fierce determination to make my mark. The factory floor, with its rhythmic hum of machinery and the smell of metal and oil, felt like a second home. I was one of the few black women in a leadership role, and certainly the youngest. My journey wasn't easy. Every step forward felt like pushing against an invisible current. Subtle glances, hushed comments, and the constant need to prove my competence were daily realities. Yet, I thrived on the challenge, believing that my work spoke for itself. I quickly climbed the ranks, moving from engineering to project management. My innovative solutions streamlined production processes, saved the company millions, and consistently exceeded targets. I was known for my efficiency, my problem-solving skills, and my direct approach to getting things done. Colleagues respected me, even if some of the older guard found my pace unsettling. The company was a legacy, founded by the Sterling family generations ago. Mr. Sterling, the patriarch, was a stern but fair man who valued hard work above all else. He saw my potential, often giving me the most challenging projects, which I always delivered on with precision and dedication. His trust was a shield against the quieter prejudices that sometimes simmered beneath the surface. I remember one instance early on, during a team meeting, when I presented a bold new strategy for waste reduction. An older supervisor, a man named Gary, chuckled and said, "That's a bit much, isn't it, Naomi? We don't want to upset the apple cart." I met his gaze, explained the data, and held my ground. The plan was eventually adopted, saving the company significant resources. My assertiveness, as I called it, was simply my commitment to excellence and efficiency. I spoke my mind, backed by facts and figures, and expected the same from others. In a male-dominated industry, this was often perceived differently when it came from a black woman. It wasn't confidence, it was being pushy. It wasn't leadership, it was being bossy. Despite these undercurrents, I genuinely believed in Sterling Manufacturing and its potential. I saw beyond the old-fashioned machinery and the traditional mindset. I envisioned a future where innovation and efficiency propelled us forward, and I was ready to lead that charge. I felt a deep sense of loyalty to the company that had given me a platform to grow. My personal life was intertwined with my professional one. I lived modestly, investing a significant portion of my income back into my education and a few quiet, strategic ventures. I had a small circle of trusted friends, mostly women who understood the unique challenges of navigating corporate spaces as minorities. They were my sounding board, my cheerleaders, and my reality check. I often reflected on my grandmother's words, "They can take your job, but they can't take your mind or your spirit." This wisdom resonated deeply, especially on days when the microaggressions felt heavier than usual. It reminded me that my true value wasn't tied to any single employer or title. It was inherent in who I was and what I could achieve. The factory itself held a certain beauty for me. The intricate dance of machines, the smell of fresh-cut metal, the raw power of production. It was a place where ideas became tangible, where raw materials transformed into essential components. I found a strange comfort in the predictability of its operations, a stark contrast to the unpredictable human element. I was always the first to arrive and often the last to leave. I immersed myself in every aspect of the business, from supply chain logistics to quality control. I learned the names of every worker on the floor, understanding their roles and challenges. This hands-on approach earned me respect from the workforce, who saw me as one of them, despite my management position. My ambition wasn't about power for its own sake, it was about impact. I wanted to see Sterling Manufacturing reach its full potential, to innovate and adapt in a rapidly changing global market. I believe my skills and vision were precisely what the company needed to secure its future. I was ready to push boundaries and challenge the status quo. Little did I know, the biggest challenge wasn't going to be a complex engineering problem or a tough negotiation. It was going to be a person, someone who saw my drive not as an asset but as a threat. Someone who embodied the very prejudices I had worked so hard to overcome. The storm was brewing, and I was completely unaware of its impending arrival. My focus was solely on the work, on the next big project, on the next efficiency gain. I was too busy building, too busy creating, to notice the shifting dynamics within the Sterling family itself. The old guard was slowly fading, and a new, less experienced generation was beginning to assert its influence. This shift would prove to be pivotal. The stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine my professional journey and force me to confront the insidious nature of discrimination head-on. My story at Sterling Manufacturing was about to take an unexpected and painful turn, one that would test my resilience in ways I never imagined. My reputation at Sterling Manufacturing grew steadily. I spearheaded a major automation project that cut production time by 15% and significantly reduced labor costs. This success earned me a promotion to Director of Operations for a key division, a role that put me in direct oversight of hundreds of employees and millions in revenue. It was a monumental achievement for me. The promotion, however, brought me into closer contact with the Sterling family's inner circle. Mr. Sterling, the CEO, was nearing retirement, and the question of succession loomed large. His eldest son, Ethan Sterling, had recently returned from business school, ostensibly to learn the ropes and eventually take over the family enterprise. Ethan was everything I wasn't. He exuded an air of inherited privilege, often arriving late, leaving early, and delegating tasks he clearly didn't understand. His interactions with employees were often condescending, and he rarely listened to input from those with on-the-ground experience. He seemed more interested in maintaining appearances than in understanding the complex operations of the factory. From our first meeting, there was an unspoken tension between us. I was direct and results-oriented. He was evasive and focused on perception. He would often interrupt my presentations, questioning my data with vague, unsubstantiated claims. It felt like a constant battle to be heard and taken seriously, even when my points were irrefutable. I noticed he treated other male directors, even those less experienced than me, with a certain deference. With me, there was always an underlying challenge, a need to assert his authority. It was a subtle power play, designed to remind me of my place, despite my proven track record and the respect I commanded from the workforce. One memorable incident occurred during a board meeting where I presented a proposal for a new supply chain management system. Ethan openly scoffed, suggesting it was overly complicated and unnecessary. He then proposed a simpler, less effective solution, clearly not understanding the nuances of the current system's inefficiencies. I calmly countered his points with detailed projections and case studies, demonstrating the long-term benefits of my proposal. The board, having seen my successes before, sided with me, much to Ethan's visible annoyance. His face tightened, and I could feel his resentment radiating across the room. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. After the meeting, Ethan cornered me in the hallway. "You know, Naomi," he said with a forced smile, "you really need to learn to pick your battles. Not everything needs to be a debate. Sometimes, it's better to just go with the flow." His tone was patronizing, a thinly veiled criticism of my assertiveness. I simply replied, "My job is to ensure the company's success, Ethan. If going with the flow means accepting inefficiency, then I can't do that." He just shook his head and walked away, clearly frustrated by my refusal to back down. This interaction solidified my understanding of his character and his approach to leadership. The atmosphere in the office began to shift. Ethan started making staffing changes, moving experienced personnel out of key roles and replacing them with less qualified individuals who were more amenable to his influence. He seemed intent on dismantling the very structures that had contributed to the company's recent successes. I tried to voice my concerns to Mr. Sterling, but he seemed increasingly detached, trusting his son to take the reins. He would listen patiently, nod, and then assure me that Ethan was finding his footing. It was clear that family loyalty outweighed objective assessment in his eyes, a painful realization for me. My days became a constant tightrope walk. I had to continue performing at a high level, managing my team, and pushing for progress, all while navigating Ethan's growing antagonism. He saw my competence not as a shared goal for the company's benefit, but as a personal affront to his authority. The subtle jabs escalated. He would forget to invite me to important meetings, or deliberately schedule them when he knew I had prior commitments. He'd make comments about my tone or my approach, always hinting that I was somehow out of line without ever specifying how. It was a slow, insidious erosion of my professional standing. I started documenting everything: emails, meeting minutes, instances of his dismissive behavior. Not because I expected immediate action, but because my instincts told me I needed a record. I felt a growing unease, a sense that something significant was about to happen, something beyond a simple disagreement. The weight of the unspoken racial and gender bias in his criticisms became heavier. He never explicitly said it, but his words, his demeanor, and his treatment of me versus others painted a clear picture. My assertiveness was a problem because I was a black woman daring to challenge a white man's authority in his family's domain. I was ready for a fight, but I didn't know the true nature of the battle ahead. I believed it was a fight for professional integrity, for the company's future. I was about to learn that for Ethan, it was a deeply personal struggle for dominance, rooted in prejudice and an inflated sense of entitlement. The day it happened started like any other. I arrived early, prepared for a crucial meeting with the board regarding the quarterly performance report. I had spent weeks compiling data, analyzing trends, and developing strategies to address some recent market shifts. My presentation was thorough, backed by undeniable facts. Ethan, however, was in a particularly foul mood. He had just come from a heated discussion with a major client who was threatening to pull their contract due to production delays he had caused. He walked into the boardroom with a scowl, barely acknowledging anyone. The air in the room felt thick with his frustration. As I began my presentation, detailing the need for immediate changes in our production schedule, Ethan interrupted me, his voice sharp. "Naomi, you're being overly aggressive. We don't need to panic. These are minor fluctuations." He waved his hand dismissively, as if my carefully researched data was trivial. I paused, took a breath, and calmly reiterated the potential long-term impact if we didn't act swiftly. "Ethan, the data indicates a significant risk to our Q3 projections if we don't adjust now. This isn't panic, it's proactive risk management." My voice was steady, professional, but firm. He slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. "That's enough," he bellowed, his face flushed. "I've had it with your constant need to challenge every decision. You're proactive this, and you're data-driven that. You're too assertive, Naomi, especially for a black woman in this company." The words hung in the air, a chilling silence descending upon the room. My heart pounded, but my expression remained unreadable. He had finally said it, the quiet prejudice now out in the open, raw and undeniable. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "My assertiveness," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet, "has saved this company millions and driven innovation." "Perhaps you confuse competence with aggression, Ethan." His eyes narrowed, fueled by a mix of anger and the sudden realization that he had overstepped, revealing his true colors. "No, I confuse it with insubordination," he spat, leaning across the table. "Effective immediately. Your services are no longer required at Sterling Manufacturing. Gather your things and leave. We'll have HR handle the formalities." He then turned to the board, trying to regain his composure. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply nodded, gathered my papers, and walked out of that boardroom with my head held high. The silence that followed me was deafening, a testament to the shock and discomfort of those who witnessed his blatant display of prejudice and power. As I walked through the familiar hallways, past the buzzing machinery and the bustling offices, a wave of emotions washed over me. Anger, yes, but also a strange sense of liberation. The gilded cage had been shattered, not by my own hand, but by the very person who sought to control me. My team, seeing my sudden departure from the meeting, looked at me with concern. I offered a small, reassuring smile, unable to explain the full truth in that moment. I knew the rumors would start immediately, but I also knew my integrity would remain intact. They knew my work. I went to my office, a space I had meticulously organized and personalized over the years. I packed a few personal items, a framed photo of my grandmother, a small plant, and a notebook filled with my ideas for future projects. Everything else, the company property, I left behind. As I walked out of the building, the afternoon sun felt surprisingly warm on my face. The familiar scent of industrial lubricant and fresh paint seemed to mock me. This was the place I had dedicated so much to, only to be dismissed for simply being myself, for being too assertive as a black woman. The sting of the injustice was sharp, a burning sensation in my chest. But beneath it, a tiny ember of defiance began to glow. Ethan Sterling thought he had broken me, thought he had put me in my place. He had no idea what he had truly set in motion. He had just opened a door to a future he couldn't possibly comprehend. I got into my car, took a deep breath, and pulled out of the Sterling Manufacturing parking lot for what I thought was the last time. The silence in my car was a stark contrast to the chaos of the last hour. My phone buzzed with a text from a trusted contact, a cryptic message that hinted at a deeper game at play. The immediate aftermath of my dismissal was a blur of phone calls and internal processing. HR contacted me with a standard severance package, which was surprisingly paltry given my tenure and contributions. It was clear Ethan wanted to make my exit as financially painful as possible, a final insult. I politely declined their offer, stating I would be consulting with my legal team. This immediately changed their tone, a flicker of concern replacing their practiced indifference. They knew I wasn't going to disappear quietly and that I had the resources and knowledge to fight back. The news of my dismissal spread like wildfire through the company and the local industry. Rumors circulated, fueled by Ethan's narrative that I was difficult, uncooperative, and not a team player. He painted me as the problem, conveniently omitting his own discriminatory remarks. Some former colleagues reached out, expressing shock and sympathy. Others, fearing for their own positions, distanced themselves. It was a stark reminder of how quickly allegiances could shift in the face of power and how easily a false narrative could take hold in a tight-knit corporate community. The pain of the betrayal was profound. I had invested so much of myself in Sterling Manufacturing, believing in its mission and its people. To be discarded so casually, and for such a prejudiced reason, felt like a deep personal wound. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, forcing me to confront the systemic biases I had always worked around. But amidst the hurt, a different feeling began to emerge, a cold, calculated resolve. Ethan Sterling had underestimated me, not just as a professional, but as a strategic thinker. He had no idea that my time at Sterling Manufacturing wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about something much bigger. For the past year, I had been operating under a deeply confidential agreement. I wasn't just a director of operations. I was a lead consultant for Aegis Capital, a powerful private equity firm specializing in industrial acquisitions. They had brought me in to conduct a covert, in-depth assessment of Sterling Manufacturing. Aegis Capital had identified Sterling Manufacturing as a prime target for acquisition due to its strong market position but outdated management practices. My role was to identify inefficiencies, assess leadership, and prepare a comprehensive report on its true value and potential for modernization. My assertiveness was exactly what they valued. My contract with Aegis stipulated that I maintain my regular role at Sterling to gain unfiltered access to operations and personnel. Only a handful of people at Aegis and Mr. Sterling himself knew my true purpose. He had been approached by Aegis and, nearing retirement, was considering their offer, but wanted an internal assessment first. My dismissal by Ethan, however, had just triggered a critical clause in my Aegis contract. It stated that if my employment at Sterling was terminated without just cause, particularly due to internal management issues, my assessment would be accelerated and Aegis would move forward with a more aggressive acquisition strategy. This was the twist. Ethan, in his arrogance and prejudice, had not only fired a valuable employee, he had inadvertently handed Aegis Capital the leverage they needed to finalize their takeover. He thought he was asserting dominance. In reality, he was paving the way for his own downfall. I immediately contacted my liaison at Aegis Capital, a senior partner named Marcus Thorne. His voice was calm, almost amused, when I explained what had happened. "Excellent, Naomi," he said. "This simplifies things considerably. Your report is invaluable. We're initiating Phase 2. Phase 2 meant a formal, and likely hostile, takeover bid. My detailed reports on Sterling's operational inefficiencies under Ethan's informal leadership, coupled with his blatant display of prejudice, would be crucial evidence. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about exposing the rot at the core. The pain of the dismissal was still fresh, but it was now overshadowed by a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my personal vindication. It was about holding someone accountable for their discriminatory actions and ensuring a company I cared about was put in capable hands. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing all my data, reports, and the documented instances of Ethan's behavior. Every subtle jab, every condescending remark, every time he undermined my authority, it was all evidence. My assertiveness was about to become his undoing. The silence from Sterling Manufacturing after my lawyer's initial contact was telling. They knew they had a problem. They just didn't know the true extent of it, or that the too assertive black woman they dismissed was about to become their new reality. With my dismissal, the covert operation shifted into overdrive. Marcus Thorne and the legal team at Aegis Capital moved swiftly. My detailed reports on Sterling Manufacturing's operational vulnerabilities, particularly under Ethan's recent influence, became the bedrock of their acquisition strategy. My initial pain began to transform into focused determination. I met daily with Marcus and his team, providing insights into the company's internal dynamics, key personnel, and the specific areas where Ethan's mismanagement had created significant liabilities. My intimate knowledge of Sterling was invaluable. Aegis Capital's approach was multifaceted. Simultaneously, they initiated a formal due diligence process, demanding access to Sterling's financial records and operational data. This put immediate pressure on the Sterling family, who were still reeling from my unexpected departure. The legal team also prepared a strong case for wrongful termination, highlighting Ethan's discriminatory remarks as a clear violation of company policy and labor laws. This wasn't just about severance, it was about setting a precedent and exposing the truth of his actions. I worked tirelessly, fueled by a sense of justice. I provided detailed accounts of Ethan's attempts to undermine my authority, his dismissive attitude towards my contributions, and the coded language he used to justify his prejudice. Every instance I had documented now served a critical purpose. The initial reaction from Sterling Manufacturing's legal counsel was one of disbelief and bluster. They attempted to dismiss my claims, reiterating Ethan's narrative of my poor fit and difficult personality. They clearly underestimated the depth of Aegis Capital's resources and resolve. But as Aegis began to unveil their findings from my reports, the hidden inefficiencies, the overlooked market opportunities, the potential legal liabilities stemming from Ethan's decisions, the Sterling family's confidence began to waver. They realized this wasn't just a disgruntled employee. Mr. Sterling, the patriarch, reached out to me directly, expressing his disappointment in the situation and hinting at a desire to resolve things amicably. I politely but firmly redirected him to Marcus Thorne, making it clear that the time for amicable discussions had passed. The news of Aegis Capital's interest in Sterling Manufacturing began to leak within the industry. The stock price, which had been stagnant, started to fluctuate wildly. Employees at Sterling grew anxious, uncertain about the future of their jobs and the stability of the company. Ethan, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the true nature of the storm he had unleashed. He continued to spread his narrative about my assertiveness and unprofessionalism, convinced that he had successfully rid himself of a problem. He saw only the surface, never the depths. My friends and trusted colleagues, particularly those who had seen Ethan's behavior firsthand, offered unwavering support. They knew the truth, and their belief in me was a powerful anchor during this turbulent period. Their encouragement kept me grounded and focused. The legal and financial maneuvers were complex, but Marcus Thorne ensured I understood every step. He emphasized that my unique position, an insider who was dismissed for discriminatory reasons, now backed by a powerful firm, gave us an undeniable strategic advantage. The goal wasn't just to acquire Sterling Manufacturing, it was to transform it. Aegis Capital had a vision for modernization, innovation, and a truly inclusive leadership structure. My role, they assured me, would be central to this new chapter. I felt a profound shift within myself. The initial sting of rejection had evolved into a fierce determination to not only reclaim my professional standing, but to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to others. This was about justice, not just personal revenge. The stage was being set for the ultimate reveal. Ethan Sterling was about to learn that dismissing a black woman for being too assertive had consequences far beyond anything he could have imagined. His arrogance had blinded him to the true power dynamics at play. As the acquisition talks intensified, so did Ethan's smear campaign. He leveraged his family's influence within the city's elite circles, spreading a distorted version of events. He painted me as an unstable, opportunistic employee who was trying to extort money from the Sterling family. Invitations to industry events dried up. Some former colleagues, once friendly, now avoided my calls. The subtle social ostracization was a painful reminder of how powerful a false narrative could be, especially when backed by wealth and privilege. It felt like being erased. I remember one particularly difficult day when I overheard whispers at a local coffee shop, people discussing that Naomi woman and her unreasonable demands. It stung, knowing that my reputation, built on years of hard work, was being systematically dismantled by lies. The isolation was a heavy burden. I had always prided myself on my professional relationships, and seeing them crumble due to baseless accusations was disheartening. It forced me to confront the reality that even in a progressive city, old prejudices could still dictate perceptions. My support system, however, remained steadfast. My small circle of friends, who had witnessed my struggles and triumphs, rallied around me. They reminded me of my worth, of the truth, and of the bigger picture. Their unwavering belief was a lifeline. "Let them talk, Naomi," my friend Sarah advised. "Their words are just noise. The truth will speak for itself when the time is right." Her words, though simple, offered immense comfort during moments of doubt and despair. Marcus Thorne also provided crucial emotional support. He understood the personal toll of such public attacks. "This is a tactic, Naomi," he explained. "They want to wear you down, make you give up. Don't let them. Your strength is their biggest threat." I focused on the work with Aegis Capital, channeling my frustration into meticulous planning and strategy. Every piece of evidence I gathered, every loophole I identified in Sterling's operations, felt like a step towards reclaiming my narrative and my dignity. Ethan's confidence, meanwhile, seemed to grow with each rumor he spread. He genuinely believed he was winning, that he had successfully discredited me and secured his position. He was blinded by his own arrogance and the echo chamber of his privileged world. He even tried to contact me directly, sending condescending messages suggesting I should move on and accept reality. I ignored them all, knowing that any engagement would only feed his ego and distract me from the larger objective. The legal battles were intense, with Sterling's lawyers attempting to delay and obfuscate at every turn. They challenged every document, questioned every claim, hoping to exhaust Aegis Capital's resources and my patience. But Aegis was prepared. I learned the true meaning of resilience during this period. To face public scrutiny, professional isolation, and personal attacks, all while maintaining composure and focus, was incredibly challenging. But I knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about a job. It was about validating my experience, about proving that competence and assertiveness were strengths, not flaws, regardless of gender or race. It was about challenging the insidious nature of systemic bias. The quiet suffering and the public humiliation only strengthened my resolve. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every Black woman who had ever been told she was too much in a space that wasn't designed for her. The stage was set. The final confrontation was imminent. And this time, Ethan Sterling wouldn't be able to hide behind his family name or his distorted narrative. The truth, backed by undeniable financial power, was about to be revealed. The day of the special board meeting arrived, cloaked in a tense silence. The air in the Sterling manufacturing headquarters was thick with anticipation. Rumors of a hostile takeover bid had solidified, and everyone knew this meeting would decide the company's fate. I arrived with Marcus Thorne and a formidable legal team from Aegis Capital. Ethan was already there, flanked by his father, Mr. Sterling, and their own lawyers. He looked confident, almost smug, still believing he held the upper hand, despite the mounting pressure. The meeting began with Mr. Sterling, his voice strained, acknowledging the unforeseen challenges and the unsolicited interest from Aegis Capital. He tried to maintain an air of control, but his unease was palpable. Marcus Thorne then took the floor, his presence commanding. He meticulously laid out Aegis Capital's proposal, a complete acquisition of Sterling Manufacturing, including a significant investment in modernization and a new leadership structure. His presentation was precise, leaving no room for doubt. Ethan interrupted, his voice laced with indignation. "This is an outrageous attempt to steal our family legacy. Sterling Manufacturing is not for sale, and certainly not to some opportunistic firm trying to exploit a temporary setback." He glared at Marcus. Marcus calmly responded, "Mr. Sterling, our offer is more than fair. Furthermore, our due diligence has uncovered significant operational inefficiencies and, regrettably, instances of discriminatory management practices that have jeopardized the company's value." At that moment, Marcus turned to me. "And to elaborate on those practices, we have a key witness and a pivotal member of our team who can provide first-hand accounts. Naomi, please." My name echoed in the silent boardroom. Ethan's jaw dropped. His face, which had been flushed with anger, drained of all color. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. He had not expected me to be there, let alone as part of Aegis Capital. I walked to the front of the room, my posture straight, my gaze steady. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "As many of you know, I was the director of operations here at Sterling Manufacturing until my recent dismissal." I then proceeded to detail the instances of Ethan's mismanagement, his deliberate undermining of my projects, and the specific discriminatory remarks he had made, culminating in his public dismissal of me for being too assertive as a black woman. I presented the documented evidence, emails, internal reports, and witness statements from employees who had observed his behavior. The room was silent, save for the rustle of papers as board members reviewed the damning evidence. Ethan tried to interject, stammering, "This is a fabrication. She's lying. She's just a disgruntled employee trying to get revenge." But his words lacked conviction, his usual arrogance replaced by desperation. Marcus Thorne stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Naomi was not merely an employee. For the past year, she has been operating as a lead consultant for Aegis Capital, conducting a comprehensive assessment of Sterling Manufacturing from within." He then revealed the confidential contract, the clauses regarding my dismissal, and how Ethan's actions had directly triggered Aegis Capital's accelerated acquisition strategy. The revelation hit the room like a bombshell. Mr. Sterling looked utterly defeated, his gaze fixed on his son, who now sat slumped in his chair, utterly broken. The realization that his son's prejudice and arrogance had cost him his family's legacy was clearly devastating. The board, faced with overwhelming evidence of mismanagement and discriminatory practices, coupled with a highly advantageous acquisition offer, had little choice. The vote was unanimous. Sterling Manufacturing was officially acquired by Aegis Capital. I looked at Ethan one last time. The man who had dismissed me, laughed at my ambition, and tried to strip me of my dignity, was now staring at the wreckage of his own making. There was no triumph in my heart, only a quiet sense of justice. The immediate aftermath of the board meeting was a whirlwind. Ethan Sterling, utterly humiliated and exposed, was effectively sidelined. His father, Mr. Sterling, retired immediately, leaving the company he built in the hands of Aegis Capital. The transition was swift and decisive. Aegis Capital wasted no time implementing their modernization plans. They invested heavily in new technology, upgraded the factory floor, and crucially, overhauled the company's leadership structure. My role in this transformation was central and undeniable. Marcus Thorne offered me the position of Chief Operating Officer of the newly acquired Sterling Manufacturing, now rebranded as Sterling Innovations. It was a monumental step, placing me in a position of immense power and responsibility, directly overseeing the very operations I had once been dismissed from. I accepted without hesitation. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a vindication. It was an opportunity to lead with integrity, to foster an inclusive environment, and to prove that true assertiveness, when coupled with competence, was a powerful force for good. Ethan tried to salvage his reputation, but his blatant discrimination and mismanagement were too well documented. He found himself ostracized from the very circles he once dominated. His arrogance had not only cost him his family's company, but also his standing in the community. The employees at Sterling Innovations welcomed the change. They had witnessed Ethan's destructive behavior and my consistent dedication. Many expressed relief and renewed hope for the company's future under the new leadership. It felt like a fresh start for everyone. My journey wasn't just about professional success. It was about profound personal growth. I had faced prejudice head-on, endured public humiliation, and emerged stronger. The too assertive label, once a weapon against me, had become a badge of honor. I established mentorship programs within Sterling Innovations, specifically designed to support women and minorities in leadership roles. I wanted to create a culture where assertiveness was celebrated, where diverse voices were heard, and where talent was recognized regardless of background. The local media eventually picked up on the story, though I chose to remain private about the specifics of Ethan's remarks. The narrative shifted from my dismissal to my return as a transformative leader. It was a powerful testament to how truth eventually prevails. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. They can't take your mind or your spirit. I had proven that. My mind, my strategic thinking, and my unwavering spirit had not only survived but had triumphed spectacularly. I continued to work closely with Marcus Thorne and Aegis Capital, advising on other acquisitions and strategic partnerships. My expertise, honed through years of navigating challenging corporate environments, was now highly sought after across the industry. My personal life also found a new rhythm. I reconnected with friends, celebrated my achievements, and found joy in the simple moments of life. The weight of the past had lifted, replaced by a profound sense of purpose and peace. Looking back, the dismissal was the catalyst I needed. It forced me out of a comfortable, albeit subtly discriminatory, environment and into a position where I could truly make a difference. It was a painful ending that led to an extraordinary beginning. My story is a testament to the fact that what others perceive as your weakness can, in fact, be your greatest strength. My assertiveness, my directness, and my refusal to be silenced were the very qualities that propelled me to where I am today. If you're watching this and you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you're too much, remember Naomi's story. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. It's defined by your resilience, your truth, and your unwavering belief in yourself.